This is Lauren, and we are live with Walking Through Fire. And today we have Melissa MacDonald. And as I promised you, we are going to hear stories of people who have survived. Okay, now that doesn't always mean, it's something completely, oh my God. Sometimes it's surviving things that you don't expect to happen and coming out the other end. So that, like I had said, that can be anything. And today we're going to hear a story from Melissa, who currently is a doctor. She is a chiropractor, but we want to find out how she got to the place that she's at, because it didn't all just come one, two, three. So I'm going to pass this over and let her introduce herself.
All, all right. My name is Dr. Melissa MacDonald, and I'm a sports chiropractor in the Twin Cities, but school was not my favoriteest place in the whole wide world. I actually, it was an extreme struggle, and I didn't learn to read until sixth grade. And having that disability, not being able to actually understand my own language, was incredibly hard. Thankfully, I had a very supportive family, but it all started when I was in first grade and my teacher said, "Hey, to my parents, your child's probably never going to make it out of high school. They're going to be a below average or C average student if they're lucky. And uh, honestly, she's cheating on her math, so we're going to watch her extra close because she's the first one done."
Okay, so sixth grade, that brings us to about what age is that? Nine? What is sixth grade? A little bit older? 10?
11, 12.
11, 12. Okay, so you're 11, 12, and you are not able to read.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a struggle. Okay, and now you're leaving sixth grade. You're going to go into junior high, and where are you currently at that point?
So thankfully, during the summer, I got to enroll into a 3D learner program because I got diagnosed as a dyslexic when I was 7 years old, but I was diagnosed with a form of auditory dyslexia, basically meaning unless I know a word, I can't sound it out, I can't spell it, I have no reference of figuring it out. So if you tell me what it is, then I know it. But until then, I don't know. And I need a picture of what the word is, meaning all these connecting words within our language, the, which, where, just the words that allow our sentences to string together, they don't have a contextual picture. So when you ask me, like, to say in my head, horse, I see a beautiful horse running through a field, jumping over a fence. Other people see the literal word HORSE, and I don't see that. So I have to have a contextual picture. So
So
then
for the
you,
words like the and we and things, there is no picture that you can come
no,
up with. So that would then make making sentences and difficult.
pardon the podcat.
That's
Uh,
okay. Cat, we have a picture of cat now. We're good. Okay. So I mean, just forming sentences as a that had to have caused such anxiety on top of this. Here you are. We know in sixth grade, you get called on, you're talking to friends, and here you are, and you're struggling with this, and your parents know you're struggling with this, but did the teachers really understand?
no, there was an experience in a science class that brought me to tears and almost had me quit, like demand for my parents to let me to quit school. And that was where I had just started to really get a handle on my reading and my writing with 3D Learner. Granted, even to this day, I have a second grade spelling level. So we were given a written test and we had to pass it around the room. It was passed out to other students and they were to grade the test. And I was just pit in my stomach. Oh my God, my classmates are going to realize what an idiot I am
I
and how
remember
much.
those. I remember when that used to happen in school, and it's so bizarre that we hold that anxiety. You remember what it felt like. You remember that sweat pouring down your face. That, oh my God, they're gonna. It was the same for math with me, but so now you have kids and you're paranoid and you're having anxiety.
And my paranoia ended up being correct. Every question, the student who had my test raised their hand and asked the teacher, "So they spelled this wrong. Do they still get credit? They wrote this. Do they get credit?" And I knew that was my paper. I had the right answer, but I hadn't spelled it correctly. And I came up to at the end of the class, I walked up and I just started bawling. And I'm like, that was my paper. That was my paper that I got tortured through class. And he's like, well, maybe if you took some more time, you'd actually spell it right and we wouldn't have to do this. And
Wow.
I was crushed. Here we are, children, they're brutal. And I mean, this is the early 2000s, late 90s that I'm dealing with this, and there just isn't that understanding. And it was horrific bullying for the rest of the day because I went to a small school. So we had the same classes with the same kids all day. There wasn't a shuffling of classes. So, and that was in the morning. So I was just tortured the rest of the day. I went home in absolute tears. And can I just say, my mom is scary. She is, she is a quintessential kind Southern woman, but you do not upset her babies. And she just went to war and contacted the school and said, hey, is this a policy? Is this how you grade assignments? Here's my daughter's diagnosis. This is what's going to happen. You are not going to. And she just went to war to make sure that I never had to go through an experience of having my paper passed around without having access to spell check, without having access to necessary items to make sure that I was able to stay in school. Because she did not, I mean, wonderful, but she didn't have time to have me at home homeschooling. Both my parents worked full time. There wasn't an opportunity for me to have access to that. I
And the
needed to,
IEPs were a little bit different then. Now there's a little bit more to them. Not that they give a lot, but there is a little bit more to them. But for people that might not know, can you explain what dyslexia is and how it affects your learning?
so dyslexia is probably the most common learning disability, and similar to other neurodiverse uh, conditions such as ADHD, autism, they all fall on a spectrum. And there are times now as an adult, once COVID's over, I'm actually looking at pursuing some additional testing because I think honestly, because I was a female in the 90s, I wouldn't get diagnosed with autism at that time. But yet I have all the classic symptoms. It's just the symptoms for females are a little different, which is we mask better, meaning we fit into society. So dyslexia really affects processing, whether that be writing, math, hearing. It's how we absorb our knowledge and information, meaning it's like being told as a fish, you need to climb this tree. And yet the rest of the class is all monkeys and you're a fish going, I can't even breathe on land. So when
Uh-huh.
I was in school, how I would hear my teachers say things initially was just wah, 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 very much the peanuts teacher. But that was with everything. I didn't have the ability to take in auditory information and be able to utilize it until I started having tutoring, remediation, and frankly, teachers that just got it, that I needed just a little extra to help my focus so that I knew I needed to hear this, but I also needed to turn it into a visual trick. So I learned how to lip read. And so if
Which is incredible. And you told me that you learned how to lip read on your own. This was your own coping mechanism.
mhm,
So
it
you
was
taught yourself.
I I didn't have a choice. The education system that I was in back then did not have like special education didn't know how to deal with someone with, I mean, I don't want to sound arrogant, but my IQ. I was given an
And
IQ
and
test.
your and what year was this? What year would you say?
When I was tested, it was 1995, 96. That is when I was
Okay.
diagnosed with dyslexia. What happened is for the rest of my elementary school, if there was something important I needed to hear, the teacher would walk behind me, place their hand on my shoulder, and that would clue me in, pay attention.
Got
Pay
it. Okay.
attention
So
to everything. And I was like locked in, watch, 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 listen, listen, listen. And that's how I started to cue my brain to look at people's
so
mouths.
almost like they would redirect you.
Mhm.
Redirect you. And you had told me that you were nonverbal completely until almost 4 years old.
When I was a little kiddo, my parents were scared I was never going to talk. I was never going to do anything. And so I just remained nonverbal for many, many years. And then finally I did start speaking and they were like, okay, everything's fine. Everything's fine. But then I would not listen. So
Okay.
the best example I have of this is I was running on concrete and my dad said, don't run. You're going to fall and hurt yourself. And well, I kept running and I fell, and now I have a scar on my forehead for where I cracked my head into a concrete wall. So even when it was for the best of me, I didn't listen. And this came out with my friends when we wanted to hang out, play games. I always had to make the rules to the game. I always had to be in charge. I had to dictate what we were doing because if they came up with it or if I had to listen to what they were doing, I couldn't do it. So
So
even
this
like,
affected even your social. This wasn't just school. This affected your life completely, every part of it.
mhm.
How about in relationships? How did it affect in relationships?
I think my husband now would be the best one to just say there are times like if he says something from the back room, he knows I'm not going to hear it. So he has to come out and get in front of me, make sure he has my undivided attention. There are times he's standing 5 feet away from me, but I'm engrossed in an email, engrossed in something on my
And so it's
computer,
just
gone. Nothing gets in. If I'm on a phone call, friends, loved ones, or even now with patients and it's loud around me, you're going to have to repeat yourself 5 or 6 times for me to actually get the information down. If we're texting, I have idiosyncrasies to my text where I mix up words. So I try to use a lot of voice to text, but even then, because I have a little bit of an accent, I grew up in the South, I moved to the North, I'm all over the place. The phone's like,
I
"You
was going
said
to say
what?"
I don't hear the accent, oddly enough. It's
I fight
yeah, I
it.
don't hear it.
There are
She's
certain
changing.
words.
She's okay. Certain words we'll hear it on, others we won't. So you get tested, and you learn to read. You told me at 13 years old.
Mhm.
And by learn to read, what does that mean? Could you fully read now, or you
Yeah,
were
so
just
up until that point, I reading was horrifically stressful. When I went to 3D Learner, which is a program that at the time was out of this couple's house, they've definitely expanded and made it bigger. They look at you and they figure out how do you learn? How do you need to function? And a lot of times within my spatial recognition, I need things that I can manipulate in my mind. I need 3D objects. So, one of the first things we did was build the alphabet in clay. Now I have each individual letter that is in a three-dimensional form that I can
that you can
manipulate and
visualize?
mhm.
Makes sense. Okay.
Then I had a 3-ring binder of all the odd words in the US in the American language that don't have like the and which and all the words that don't have pictures for, and I could draw my own pictures for them. And I could create the imagery needed to start to be able to put sentences together.
So you were making correlations between these pictures that you designed and the word.
Mhm.
Okay, so this makes sense. This sounds like a good idea here.
It was phenomenal, but then to translate this for like a spelling test in school. So let's say we had a 20-word spelling test. Well, then I had to spend hours building each word in clay, creating a picture for that word, understanding what it is, all just to pass one 20-point quiz that shouldn't be that hard to do.
So
So
homework for you and studying for you were how many hours?
I think in middle school and high school, I would spend around 4 to 6 hours each night on my schoolwork.
So you really had to put a lot of effort in just to get through the basic first kindergarten through 12. So now
Mhm,
you make it into high school.
mhm.
You're in high school, and how does that go?
Well, there were certain classes that I utilized in EIP, and that were mainly my English and writing classes. If there were any written essays, I would have extra time or be able to utilize a computer. I found typing, because there's automatic spell check, to be much less anxiety provoking. Even to this day, the thought of sitting down and writing a blog, writing content on social media is excruciatingly anxiety producing. And I mean, I've set up ways to deal with it, but it's still just agonizing. So writing papers in school, painful. I eventually, so during my senior year of high school, I decided to take some college credits because I just wanted to get some out of the way so that when I went away to school, I wouldn't have to worry about them. And one of them was college English. I
Oh
wanted
boy.
I
Okay.
wanted all my
You
English
wanted it
done.
out of the way. Get it done.
I
Okay.
never wanted to take that class again in my life. So I took a college English class. Thankfully, my second term instructor was actually a family friend. And she sat down and she's like, look, every essay consists of these 5 parts. Every paragraph, you can put this into a paragraph form. You can make this into a 5 paragraph. You can make this into a dissertation. But this is the base you have to work with. So start with this outline, start filling it in. Do not worry about what you're putting down. Compose your thoughts, then write it. If I hadn't had that, I don't know if I would have made it through college. I don't know if I could have made it through any of my writing.
So
Thankfully,
that one teacher that you had really made the big difference.
she really, really did. She took the time to go, "You are a science math brain." Like, I went to a very small public school in Michigan. I graduated 46 people. I had all the math they offered completed by junior year.
And
Like,
that
I
was
had
easy for you. That came like no problem.
sleep. If for our geometry class, they would take the highest score and then calculate everybody's score after that, and they had to throw mine out because no one would have gotten a D or higher if they had used my score.
Wow. So
Math,
okay, so math and science came no problem.
mhm. So those things were so easy to me that the only classes history, oh my god, I am horrible. I have no I can't keep dates straight. I have no idea how timelines work. History is a nightmare. My husband makes fun of me because he'll be like, "Such and such was president," and I'll be like, "Uh-huh."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And or taking a foreign language class.
Oh, I
Oh,
can imagine that's even worse. We
I'm
can't
alr
do we're struggling right now in our own language. We can't go anywhere else.
So math, science, and art were my 3 classes that are like, I can do this. This is where I
Very
excel.
visual, all very visual classes. So anything that wasn't visual was difficult.
Mhm.
So do you think now, do you have any PTSD from all of that?
I would say yes. The writing comes up as some PTSD. I mean, I still have severe anxiety. When I have a deadline that I have to write something, I will be in tears. And my husband's like, "You do realize if you'd calm down and just get it done, it'd be already done with versus this meltdown you're having." And I'm like, "You leave me alone."
This is my coping mechanism right now. I'm doing it.
I will say that when I look back at school, I pretty much have disattached myself from anything uh, with high school. I really don't talk to anybody. I've never gone to a reunion. I've never been involved with that because that environment was just so horrible because school isn't designed to actually teach you anything. It's to make sure that you can fulfill their metrics of what they consider is standard for what they think is going to be best for the country. And it doesn't really teach you anything other than to get into college necessarily. No real viable skills there. So if you're struggling in learning and you're having to fit their shoebox of what they think is necessary for you to learn, it's next to impossible sometimes to get through it. And it was just so frustrating to then get into like ACTs and SATs
Oh, I can imagine. There's even more reading and writing. Okay.
and
So you
just
were
those.
struggling and struggling, and these teachers are saying to your parents and to you, this kid is not going anywhere. She's never going to graduate. Don't really have any expectations of her. And now we move on, and you are, how did we get to Dr. Melissa McDonald? I mean, that's a big thing to go from your child will never accomplish anything. Don't expect anything from her because she doesn't have it in her to Dr. Melissa McDonald. How did we get there?
Well, in high school, definitely I hid my dyslexia as best I could. I didn't use as much EIP as I had accessible. I used it in the classes that I absolutely had to. English, history, classes that I wouldn't
Well,
have
because a
survived
lot of
without
times
it.
they pull the student out in front of others, and the child feels uncomfortable and now has anxiety, and oh, they get extra time, and blah, blah, that's, and it causes like another thing with school causes more anxiety, and IEP is gives these kids anxiety. It's a lot of anxiety.
And my anxiety had a great way of manifesting itself as stomach ulcers. So I had
Okay.
my first bleeding stomach ulcer when I was in
Oh my
5th and
goodness.
6th grade. I had them throughout high school to where I had to be medicated. Otherwise, I would just be sick all day. It hospitalized me one time. When I was in middle school, I
As a
was
10-year-old, a bleeding ulcer from stress and anxiety from school as a
Mhm,
10-year-old.
mhm, and I was like
Unbelievable.
5'4", 5'6", and I only weighed like 90 pounds because I just couldn't eat. That was how my stress manifested and how I just physically was ill from all the anxiety. Now, college was a place that I definitely had a higher level of advocacy for myself. I was like, "You know what? I have the ability to have access to an IEP. I'm gonna make sure I utilize it because these courses are expensive. I don't want to have any issue." And then on top of that, because the classes are so large, because of the way they have their exam set up, no one even realizes when you're using it. And it
So
was
it
a
was a
much
little bit
more
more anonymous situation, so you were more comfortable using what they gave.
Mhm.
Okay.
So my bachelor's degree is in chemistry with a minor in biology, and I was a couple credits shy of a dance minor as well.
Which is so extreme. I mean, to be a chemistry, to have a major in chemistry, and then you add dance to it. Everything is visual, but look how, I mean, these are classes that for me, those would be my nightmare classes where English is easier. Um, so it's so to look at a student and say this kid's never going to go anywhere because of one situation is so sad in the educational system because that lives with you. Somebody said it, and obviously you didn't have problems. So you get into college, you're majoring in this, you get the bachelor's in that, and then
Well, I should also add that I got to go to school on an academic scholarship where half of my schooling was paid for through that. So I had a $36,000 scholarship
and that was because of
because of my GPA in high school because again, I spent 4 to 6 hours. I did all the work I needed. I had a 3.9 GPA.
even with all that going on, even with all the anxiety, the bleeding ulcers, you still had a 3.9 in high school.
Mhm.
I mean, so if that doesn't show people how much you can overcome, I always say that people will say, you're not able to do it, or somebody will say, they gave this person 6 months to live. You are not, you can't put time or on the human condition, and you can't tell a person what they can do or what they're going to accomplish, because this just goes to show that's all out the window. Everybody learns different, everybody's a different person. So now you get a full scholarship, even through all the struggle. You got a 3.8 GPA, you go into college with college credits, correct?
Mhm.
So how many college credits did you go into school with?
9. I had all my English and I ended up doing my communications class because I was nerve I am a very nervous, or I used to be a very nervous public speaker.
So you got anything that was going to cause real anxiety out of the way before you even got in. So 9 credits is almost a full semester. One semester, it's usually 12, but
Uh, and then because I wanted to do everything, I ended up averaging about 18 to 19 credits per term. I technically had enough credits to graduate with a general degree by the end of my junior year, but to complete my chemistry degree, I needed to finish my senior project and take thermodynamics, I think.
and for most people, if you don't know, a normal person, okay, they're a regular semester for a starting student is 12 credits. 18 credits, usually you get signed off to take 18 credits because you are more than capable of doing that. And she was obviously more than capable. So that speeds you up on graduation and things like that. So now you're in college and you decide how to go for chiropractic. How did that come in?
So all I always wanted to help people. I always wanted to go and do something in medicine. And I did kind of be like I was fearful of how am I going to get into medical school? How am I going to survive getting into doing this? So I wanted to make sure I had the commitment to it and I started shadowing providers. I wanted to be a surgeon, shadowed some general surgeons, realized that wasn't for me. Grey's Anatomy is not accurate to how things are portrayed.
This is wrong. This is not going to work.
I looked at optometry, I looked at physical therapy. My mom was a physical therapist. And I also worked with some chiropractors. And my mom's like, you know what? You're good with your hands. You have this capability to help people under getting like keeping my medicine straight. I always struggled in my pharmacology classes. And she was like, why not just take that pharmacology out? Look at chiropractic. You don't have to deal with pharmacology. All you're dealing with is rehab, adjusting, hands-on
And it's
modalities.
also very visual as well. It's a hands-on visual. You look at somebody, you can kind of tell where the pain's coming from. You're walking a little bit to the right. We know we've got a problem somewhere. So it's also visual. So you've stayed in what you've been strong in.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You have to find your area that you're best at and then just focus on it. So I went to chiropractic school. I decided to do an accelerated program
Of
because
course you did.
why not? So I completed my degree in 3 years.
Wow.
And then I did a 2-year sports fellowship after graduation with specialty training, working with high performance female athletes. Now I own my own practice. I run a podcast and I am a university faculty member where I teach emergency procedures and CPR.
So so now you're teaching
Mhm.
emergency procedures. What is that? What does that cover?
So while I was in chiropractic school, I also decided to get my EMT license. So
Okay.
I took night classes so that I became a licensed EMT. And then for emergency procedures that I teach, it's really allowing chiropractic, acupuncture, and massage students to respond to emergencies that could come into their office: heart attacks, stroke, uh, acute injuries where maybe someone falls, slips on the ice, breaks an arm, breaks an ankle, recognizing the difference between when someone comes in explaining symptoms, is it actually musculoskeletal, something we can treat, or is it an underlying that visceral vascular issue that really we should no touchy and send out for emergency assessment?
So you took your degree and you continued on that, and you seem to have the personality where you're going to push. They said you can't, so you're going to push further, and you're going to continue to push further and prove to yourself and to everybody else that it can be done. So for people who hear this story, what do you say? Because we hear a lot of people. I'm an amputee. I run a nonprofit for people with CRPS. It's a neurological disease, and we get a lot of people. They feel very hopeless. I've been told by the doctor I can't do this. I'm never going to be able to walk I'm never going to have what I thought I'd have. What do you say to people who feel like that?
If I had listened or my parents had listened to my first grade teacher, I wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation with you. I would not be in the position I'm in. So if you have someone tell you something, you can't do something that you want to do, find a second opinion. Go somewhere else and ask, because I'm here to tell you, when you look at what's out there within the Paralympic realm, when you go out there and look into the Special Olympic realm, or even into the Olympic realm, or my story where I simply, people said, "Hey, you have a learning disability. You're not going to be able to learn or make it." And I went, "Screw you. I'm doing this." You kind of have to have that obstinate attitude of, cool, you've told me no. I'm going to find someone that's going to tell me yes and allow me to do it safely.
Now, do you think, had you not done that 3D learner, that you'd be in the situation you're in currently?
Absolutely not. For me,
So,
3D Learner was the game changer that allowed me to access the language in a way that allowed me to be able to read.
so can you give me more on the 3D learner for people who have children, perhaps? And are there signs that this is going on early? Are there signs that you can look at as a parent, as a teacher, to figure out that perhaps the struggle that this child's having is dyslexia and not something else?
Well, it all kind of depends upon what symptoms they're presenting with. For me, when we were going through first grade reading and learning all our vowel sounds, and we were trying to learn how to sound out words, I couldn't do it. You could give me a letter and tell me what the sound was, and then I couldn't reproduce it. I couldn't
Okay.
figure out how to say it, and then translating it to a piece of paper, I couldn't figure out how. I could not read. But yet, if you gave me a math problem, no matter the complexity of the math problem, I could do the math problem. So it's usually that, especially for dyslexic, that's disparity. One area is incredibly strong, way above grade level. And the other area that they're struggling in, it's like, oh, bless their heart, how are they going to get through school? And it's that kind of disparity that clues you in. This person needs to be tested. Once tested, that's where there are so many programs
And
for.
where would somebody get tested? Where do they take a child or themselves? You know, maybe they're a little older and they've been struggling. Where would they go to get tested?
So the first place to start is your primary care to get a referral. This
Okay.
way, insurance will cover it.
All right. All right. That's good to know.
So you want that referral. You're then going to see I believe it's a psychiatrist who will run you through testing. The last time I was tested was in 2013 or 2014.
Is it something
Just
you need to continue to be tested regularly?
if you're in school, yes, you have to
Okay.
continue to prove that you're still dyslexic enough to qualify for your EIP.
Enough. Okay. So you needed enough. You have to fit into a scale. Okay. All right.
So for me, I wanted to have extra time on my national registry boards for my chiropractic degree. There are 4 boards that are incredibly expensive. I didn't want to have time pressure on myself to complete them. For them, I had to be tested within 2 years of taking the board to confirm that I
Okay.
still was dyslexic enough to require the accommodation.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Needless to say, I passed.
Congratulations. I'm proud of you over here. You are still where you were. That's great. Okay.
Still
You
dyslexic.
get the IEP. Okay. So you get the extra time.
And that was the thing that I probably needed the most, was time and or spelling help. So like our anatomy and physiology class, everything was spelling based, which if you've ever taken anatomy and physiology at a doctoral level, there's a lot of things that are spelled really weird.
Yeah. That's a lot. That's a
So
lot.
I had spelling accommodations for that so that I didn't have to know the spelling as long as I could come up with the word that went to the body part.
So now I have a question. So I would think, now this is just me thinking, if you look at the human body, I would assume you know the body parts pretty well.
Yes, now, but that was so I have bachelor's in chemistry. This was my first time taking anatomy and physiology. So there's the femur, But then there's all the bumps and grooves that all the muscles attach to the fever. And then there's all the nerves and the blood vessels and the veins and like everything.
And the strange spelling and all of that jazz that didn't go so easily.
So now I have a much firmer grasp, and it's not like, oh, there's the quad muscle. Well, there's four individual muscles that make up the quad, knowing each individual insertion and
Which is
origin.
why
And
it's a quad. Got it. That's a good way to remember it, which is why it's a quad, four muscles.
so it really came down to a lot of work and a lot of time in our anatomy lab, actually working with the cadavers and feeling and palpating and knowing where all the muscles were. It was a very tactile experience for me to get through a gross anatomy. Surprise.
But you did do it, and you did it successfully. And
Mhm.
that's, like I had said when I was explaining the podcast, I want people to see that struggle comes in all different shapes and sizes. People are like, oh, I'm so sorry about your leg. You know what? There are people that are struggling every single day, and it's finding a way to get through it. And I think that's the most, and I keep telling people you need to listen to other people's stories, because throughout my journey, I've learned to be more open to listening. And by listening, even to your story, it just reiterates the fact that there is nothing anybody says means anything, because it's what you're able to accomplish, what you're able to push through. And you are showing that there is no limits. The limits are in your mind. But that's it. Whatever you choose to limit yourself to is what it's going to be. So now you're a doctor. You have your own practice, you said. How do you do that? How do you run your own practice? Here you are, you're having trouble reading, you're having trouble writing, yet you have a degree, you are a doctor, you run your own business, you are successful, you are a female, you are just taking the glass ceiling off. How does it work?
Really, it comes down to I don't take no for an answer. If you tell, or I don't take you can't do this for an answer, and I just forcibly make it happen. I, on my computer, have the program Grammarly downloaded that
And what is
automatic.
that? What is that for people who don't know? What does that do?
Grammarly is a program that checks your spelling, checks your grammar, makes so I'll type something and it'll go, I think you're really actually meaning this, and this would actually fit the flow of your writing, because I'll flip between passive and present tenses in my
Okay, got
writing,
it.
and
Yes.
it catches that for me.
Okay. So
It
that's good. So for somebody who with dyslexia, this is something you're going to want to have. This is something you download on your phone, on your computer, either
it
one?
Yep, it can be put on phone, it can be on your computer, it can be in your web browser, it can also be within your Word document. So I have it just dispersed everywhere so that anytime I'm writing, I have my little friendly Grammarly, or I can write offline, copy, paste, pop it into a Grammarly doc. It just goes through, gives me my check. Then I can have my husband read it over and go, okay, let's make sure that the bots didn't miss anything. Does
Okay.
this actually read the way I want it to? So that, and there's still time I make mistakes, especially when I'm tired. Oh my goodness. When I'm tired, things can get really quirky with my writing and my spelling. And you can kind of see within my posts when I did not do that post well rested.
Okay. Okay. So definitely, so that affects the way you function. Sleep
Mhm.
is also another thing that obviously affects the dyslexia in some way, shape, or form. What are some of the other coping things that you do in order to keep things going smoothly? So you have Grammarly.
So there are other ways that dyslexia will affect me, and it's something that I've dealt with my whole life, is I cannot tell the transition of time.
Okay.
So where I can sit and do something for 4 hours and not move and not realize I've sat for 4 hours.
Oh, all right. Okay.
So I set timers, I create schedules. I have my whole day kind of timed out so that I get alerts on my phone or my watch going, "Hey, move to your
So you have
next
an
task."
itinerary for each day. So okay, so it's very punctual. We're on a schedule.
Mhm.
Otherwise, had if you didn't have the schedule, what happens?
If so, my mind wanders, I'll get distracted, I'll start playing on my phone, I'll get hyper focused on my phone, and 4 hours will pass of me playing on my phone and nothing will get accomplished.
Okay.
Versus if I have like these time step gap, like time reminders, hey, here's your phone play time. You get to play for 30 minutes. Ding. Okay, your 30 minutes are done. Now you need to go do this, do that. Okay, now you get like a 10-minute reward. Like I have to keep it that structured for me to actually get stuff done. Otherwise, I procrastinate. I have uh object permanence issues, meaning if I can't see it, it's not going to get done. So I make
Okay.
lists everywhere. It's really kind of creating coping mechanisms. And people are like, oh my gosh, that sounds like so much work. It
It actually,
is.
I'm a big list maker and I feel like it makes life easier. If I don't have a list, I'm kind of like all over the place. But I feel like if you have a list, you have an idea what you got to get done by the end of the day.
And not sponsored, but my new favoriteest thing in the whole wide world is my Rocket Planner.
What is that?
So what makes it really awesome is it's an erasable planner.
Okay.
So if for coming in and making like I can make lists, I have my schedules. It uses friction-based pens so that they're all
Oh,
erasable.
this is a bougie planner. This is no regular planner. So the Rocket Planner is
Yeah,
intense.
it's an intense little book,
I see that.
but it's only like 20 bucks, so it's not that
Okay.
bougie.
All right.
Um you and when the day's done, you just take a moist cloth and wipe it away and it's clean. So then when I
Wow.
make my to-do list for the day, I can track it for the entire week, see what I accomplished. Because a lot of times I have imposter syndrome where I don't think I'm doing enough. Well, I can keep a list of everything I accomplished that week, see it at the end of the week and go, hey, look at what I did. And then, okay, it's a new week, wipe it up. But what's really nice about this is it has QR codes and a key at the bottom. So I can
Okay.
take photos of it and it actually saves it and imports it to my Gmail, Google Drive.
So this is called a Rocket Planner,
Mhm.
and we can purchase this. Is this like an Amazon thing? Can we purchase this on a $20? I'm about
Mhm.
to get myself one, so thank you. And this is great. So you can
Yeah.
keep track of everything.
It's the Rocketbook
The
Panda
Rocket
Planner.
Book. I mean, that's great. Okay, so these are just little things that you use that help make daily life easier.
Mhm.
So
I
so
color code
basically
everything.
you've personally figured out how to do this yourself.
Mhm.
Now, do you have, I don't know if you have a book or you've written something based on this. Have you taken what you've learned and no?
You want me to write something?
Oh my,
Oh.
I want, I should have thought that through. This is going to have to be a team effort. In your podcast, I don't know about your podcast. Do you talk about this in your podcast? Because I think that people should know what the podcast is.
So I host the Mac Performance Podcast. It is a health and wellness podcast that will whiplash you back into health. And I honestly have never talked about my personal dyslexia neurodiversity journey on that podcast because it's hard. It's a hard conversation to have. And I've not taken the time to have that conversation on my podcast. But
Well, we're doing it now, so we're going to have to share it to your podcast because I think that, I know that my partner, she has dyslexia as well, and I know that even when she has to read to me, I can see the anxiety in her face. So it's something that, as a teacher, I taught high school, you can see that anxiety. And I always made sure to not be the teacher who called on the student to read out loud. I always thought that was such a vicious thing to do. And, or the public speaking come up and, in September when a teacher told you, you have to do an oral presentation in June, from September 1st till June, you were sweating. You're having nightmares about it for that part of, I think, the educational system really needs to change because they don't realize how much trauma and anxiety it causes children. And look, so much so that we still remember it vividly as adults now, that it's caused trauma.
I would rather do a public presentation now than write anything. I will always be like, yeah, 500 people I have to stand in front of. Done. Let's go. Oh, you want me to write a 2-page paper? pass. I'll pass. I don't want to do it.
Now, if
So
you do a presentation, do you do it with writing that you're reading, or you're going straight from your head?
I will create a PowerPoint to keep me on task, but I generally will just
Wing
freeform
it.
speak.
Okay, which keeps it, I would assume, a lot calmer. As long as you're not seeing those words and you're not looking at a full script to read, you're much more calm.
Mm-hmm.
So you've found so many different ways to kind of
Mm-hmm.
go around the situation and still become a successful person and have everything you wanted to have. How do your parents feel about it? I mean, they must be, I mean, beyond thrilled.
They are very proud. I honestly couldn't have gotten to where I am without my parents. They have been heavily supportive, especially my mom. Like even to this day, when I write a blog and I need someone to read it over, she'll read it over for me and just make sure that it doesn't have what we've nicknamed Macisms in it.
Okay.
And just little things like that. So, no, incredibly proud. I mean, technically, I'm a little bit of the black sheep of the family. My entire family is financial advisors, and then I'm the
Yeah,
chiropractor.
the chiropractor. Listen, okay, it sounds a little more exciting though, so that's okay. But I mean, it works with what, like visual. I mean, it's a visual situation and everything is hands-on, so it makes sense. It all makes sense. Now, before I end the show, here's what I want to ask you. If there is somebody out there right now and they feel like they don't want to do this anymore, this is just all too much, or they're in high school, or there's so many different people that are going to watch, what would you say to somebody who just feels like this just is just too much, I can't do this anymore?
So I was in that point in high school. I didn't want to go on. I wanted to quit. I had artwork damaged. I was called names. There were classes that I was scared to open my mouth from being bullied for what I would say. And you know what? It is horrific when you're in it, but it is 4 years. It is 4 years, a very small speck of your life in the grand picture of things that now that I'm 33 and I look back, they don't matter.
No.
Those 4 years do not matter. What matter is you focusing on yourself, figuring it out, what makes you happy, what makes you successful, what makes you able to survive in a world that is standardized to the normal when no one's normal. So you have to start to find ways that function for you in the world. And that can be a fun game of how do I make this work for me so that you're kind of scheming the system.
I absolutely love that. Any other things that you can give us, any other advice that you've got?
Hmm. So, big things that help me: structure, consistency, and being honest and open with people. So I told my husband before we got married, here's where I am, here's who I am. If you want to talk to me and it's important, make sure you have eye contact with me. Get my attention, whether that be physically, like grabbing my hand, touching my shoulder, get my attention.
Make sure I'm looking at you.
And I always ask, please be patient. I'm not intentionally being this way. It's just how my brain works. It's a unique system that works for us. And because I was open and honest about it, he really does everything he can to help me. But there are times he's just like, you are a difficult person to be around.
But you've both have found a way to make it symbiotic.
Yeah,
Um,
we've been together 10 years, so I think it's
so, oh
it's
yeah, so you've
okay.
definitely figured it out. But again, I think being your authentic self and being true to yourself, and again, this story, another person saying that stop listening to what other people are saying and listen to who you are, listen to your heart, and follow your dreams. And With that, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. This was wonderful to hear your story. You're an absolute success. And I mean, I'm proud of you. You should be proud of yourself. And I can't thank you enough.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was incredible.
Thank you, and have a great night.
You as well.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.